Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and today I have Kevin. Kevin, how are you today? Thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your journey.
Doing all right. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I know it's been in the works for a little while, so I'm
Yeah.
glad to finally be here and get to meet you face to face for the first time through video.
And I'm actually super excited because you're like the third male I've actually interviewed. The
Oh,
majority of my
really?
guests have been female. Yes.
Oh, that's interesting, huh? Why do you think
Yes.
that
I'm
is?
like, I
It's
don't
just
know.
worked out that way.
I don't know if it's because since I'm a female, like I'll just attract more females to be
Gravitate
able
towards
to,
it. Yeah.
gravitate towards it. But I was thinking about that. I was like, man, I really need to get more males on this show because it's
Yeah.
just been females.
Actually, you know what's funny? On my podcast, I also have, I think, majority females guests. I think it's
Interesting.
just more, they're more willing to uh honestly just to like put their story out there and
Yeah.
and build community. And I think guys are kind of a little bit more like a little more like in their shells kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
That's true. Well, Kevin, let's get started with you introducing yourself. And I know you mentioned your podcast, and then we can talk a little bit about that later on in the show.
My name is Kevin Munoz. um I live in New Jersey currently, but I originally came and immigrated from Guatemala. And that's when I was a little kid. So when I was 7 years old, my family and I came over here. And just give you like a quick uh, overview that we came to California in Inglewood. And then we stayed there for 2 years, and then we moved to Denver, Colorado, for a year, and then we finally ended up in like New Jersey. So we kind of just hopped around and finding the right home, I guess.
Okay, so from Guatemala to California, so you were 7. So, like, how did they tell you, or how did the conversation go about you guys moving? Do you know like what events actually led to you guys your move?
All I really gathered is just, we were moving, which is just kind of the same story that a lot of us immigrants have, is that we were moving for a better opportunity in the States. And that's just because obviously the economy of, Guatemala is not the best, and just a lot of Latin American countries as well. And there's a lot of corruption and little opportunity to make something of yourself, and for especially for your kids. And my parents being older and growing up there, they knew, they understood that well, so they wanted to take that leap, to just give us a better life, and see what's more out there, that because they
Yeah.
didn't want that similar type of environment. For us, they wanted us to, get do earn our own like money and make our own lives, but also not be like working um till we die. So that's
Yeah.
that, I think that's, they always want better for their kids, and that's what I understood from an early age. And being that age, you have to kind of just go with it, like at 7 years
Yeah.
old.
I mean, you have no choice. How was it for little Kevin moving to a whole different country? Like, do you remember like the feeling that you had coming?
It was, I mean, it was kind of, it just, for me, it was very, it was scary, but knowing that I was with my family, it was comforting in that sense. So while I did have like that fear that we're moving to a new place, leaving kind of everything behind, I did find comfort in knowing that I was with the people that, they are looking out for me, right? And then that
Yeah.
I love, and I know that's it's for a better opportunity. And as a result, of that, I also just became very like observant throughout my life. Um,
Mm.
and and then getting to into the United States, I was just kind of like picture like movie, like little kid, like look like seeing everywhere, like for the
Yeah.
first time, like everything. That was what I remember is just seeing like all the new places and cars, and because where I'm from, it was yeah, there was cars, but it wasn't like to that to like the extreme like
Yeah.
here, like the traffic and like
Mm-hmm.
to that end.
Yeah.
Since I came from like a little pueblo in the valleys, so yeah, that was interesting.
Are you an only child?
No, I have my sister, she's a year older, and then my little brother, he's 15.
Oh, okay. Wow. So, and then your little brother was born here. So it was just you and your
Right.
sister that came? Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Gotcha. And okay, so you guys landed in California, lived there, but then moved to Colorado and then moved to New Jersey. So
Yeah.
I have found, that immigrants, since they already moved a whole country, like it's so much easier for us to like move from state to state, like it could be like a job opportunity or maybe just things weren't working out where they, first moved to. So how was that going from California to then Colorado and then growing up in New Jersey for you?
Yeah, so I didn't officially start school till I was in Denver, Colorado. So while we were in California, it was just kind of in the house with like my grandparents and just kind of did my own thing and like watched TV and played with toys, anything that little kid would do at that period in the house, right? But the reason for us just moving around a line for many immigrants too is just finding the right place that fits your needs, um, and those needs at that moment, and are finding a job and just being somewhat stable. So the reason for that is, for moving states is just finding jobs. It was hard to find jobs in California, at least in the area that we were. And while we had our grandparents there, we didn't have too many connections there other than them. And then we moved to Denver, Colorado with my uncle. And then I started school there, and that's where I learned English as well. So that was interesting, because I had to take like all the ESL classes, and interacting with kids was tough. But I've at that age is I think it was a great age, hindsight, to be here because you pick up languages so easily and new things. That's like when you're just absorbing, like you're just a data
Mhm.
like absorbing machine at that age. Um, so I learned English pretty quickly. My sister and I both did. And and then it was a great. I mean, Denver, Colorado was beautiful. I made friends there. So it's kind of sad when we had to move from Denver, Colorado
Mhm.
to New Jersey again for the same reasons that we had. There's just my dad found like little jobs, but he wasn't able to like have anything stable. Um, and then finally we moved to New Jersey, and in New Jersey we have they knew more people from like where we were, so
Oh, okay.
specifically in Guatemala. So that helped us kind of connect, and use like network and connect with people and find jobs, and then eventually he and people that would help him too, and my parents, I would help them both get jobs, and what places are like good to make money and all that. So that's why we stuck with New Jersey. And then the only thing with New Jersey, even within New Jersey, we still had to move around like
Mhm.
townships, just like from city to city because of just rent. Because when you're first coming here, and then even over the years, we just moved around because rent would go up, and we couldn't afford it anymore. Um, but my parents, they tried to like keep us like in a stable school, just in a stable environment for the schools during that time, because it's tough always having to move to schools and like always making new
Mhm.
friends. Um, so yeah, that's how that was.
Yeah. No, that's interesting because even as I'm thinking about us, like I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but like even within the city, like we moved a lot. So it's
Right.
like when I go back home to visit in Michigan, I'm like, man, like I lived over here and then I lived here, and it's just crazy to
Yeah.
think until finally my dad was able to purchase a house, and then it was like, okay, now we're stable. We were there for X amount of years, but yeah, it's
Right.
like we just picked up and moved and everything. So I want to know, what was the first cultural shock that you remember?
Uh, I guess the first culture shock is kind of takes me back to again when I came into the United States and just just experiencing how fast paced like life is here
Mm,
compared to how it is over there. You know, everything over there is just everything is kind of slower. You get to kind of enjoy more of your environment that you're in, you know, kind of nature and all that. Well here it's just so fast paced. So that was a, a big difference that I noticed right away. Um, and you know, because you're always just working, and then you're moving and fast food, and I think that that's just the life here is fast, like, and
yes.
it's hard to slow it down. So you kind of have to remind yourself at times that you know, to take some step back and just slow it down because you're gonna get caught up in like the fast lane. So that's just
Yeah.
my that was my first thing that I noticed immediately. And as far as like culture, like barrier, I mean, it was a language, but again, like I said, I was a little kid, so I learned English pretty quick. So yeah, I think that was great. And then another one that's a cultural difference that I thought was interesting that I was mentioning to my girlfriend the other day was how like opening I don't know if you've been like to people here, like they open their gifts like in front of people, right? They like I think they make it have it's just like a thing. It's like culturally they just open their gifts in front of people. While like over there we kind of find that to be kind of rude to open it in front of
Yes.
people. So I thought that was interesting because I was talking to her about it. I'm like, that's so interesting that that's just how like that cultural difference. And I always feel like awkward when like I have to like open my gifts in front of like her family, for example. And I'm like, this is so weird because like it feels rude, you know, but that's
Yeah.
it's just what they do. So yeah.
Well, that's interesting. That's the first cultural shock that I've heard of that about the
Hmm.
gifts, but it's true. Like I'm thinking about it, it's like it is kind of awkward to just like, for us it's like opening and kind of not like bragging, like, oh, this
Yeah,
is what I
yeah.
got. Yeah, kind of
Because we're
thing.
always
Yeah.
taught to like be humble and like do
Yes.
all that and that and to me, yeah, it was kind of awkward like opening the gifts in front of people, and and also even still, I think it is to me, it's still awkward because it's like people see your reaction to
Oh,
like
yes.
people's gifts. So I always try to keep like a poker face so just to like keep it
Yeah.
straight because then because you know what if like you're more excited about one gift than the other, then that might make someone feel like some type of
Feel
way. And
bad.
then yeah,
Yes.
so that's why I always think it should be like you get your gifts, you put them in like your room and you enjoy the day, whatever. And then you thank people later about your gifts. You know, like thank you for the gift. Like
Yes, that is true. Cause like, what if you don't like it? It's like, "Oh,
yeah,
thanks,"
like
It's awkward.
like I've seen that video on the internet where the kid like gets an avocado. He's like, "Oh,
Yes.
an avocado!" Like that. So thanks. Like that's how I imagine it too.
Yes, exact oh my gosh, that's so true. So let's talk about you visiting Guatemala for the first time after you guys had moved. Like, how was that experience, and how old were you?
So this was in let's see, we visited Guatemala in 2017. So it was I was fresh out of college, so um I was like 23, and you know, it was interesting because it was my sister and I, and the way that we have so for people that don't know, I'm under Daca. That's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival, which is a program that Obama implemented through an executive order. And that just allows us to work here and do our thing as a normal US citizen with the exceptions of like traveling outside of the US without any permission. Um, and that so we finally we got DACA when it was first rolled out in 2012, and we applied for it immediately because my parents were like on it. So like we were like, we got to get you guys on it. And so we renew it every 2 years, and there's fees that come with that. That's a pain. And we found out that we could visit home through Advance Parole, which is just giving us permission to go out of the U.S. We ask immigration, we submit proof, and if they think it's something that is viable and lines up with their reasons, that they can accept for it, then they do accept it, and then you can travel for a certain amount of time as long as you come back, obviously. Um, and so that's what we did. We applied for it. We went to go see my grandma, and that was the first time going back since we left as kids. And it was so it was, I don't know, it was weird. Like, it was great, and it was beautiful, but it was just, you always had that like looming um dark cloud of like, at least I did. I don't know, like, how this was my experience. My sister, I'm sure, did too. Um, of like, what are we gonna? Because this was our first time traveling out, with permission and advance parole. We had, I had that feeling of like, what if they don't let us back in? And like, so you can't really
Mm,
enjoy your time there. We went for a week. They gave us more, but then our lawyers, and for anyone out there, they also don't recommend you stay more than like
yeah.
or up to the amount that they give you, just because it can become a problem if your like flight gets delayed or something like that. So you always have to take that into consideration. So we stayed for a week, and met a bunch of people, and a lot of people I didn't remember. My sister had to kind of like be like, oh yeah, that's so and so, and I'm like, oh okay, like, oh wow, you're so grown, and I was like, yeah, I guess so. Like, and but yeah, it was beautiful, and then it was awesome, like, visiting our hometown again, since we left, and it's where we grew up, so we did feel that connection with our roots there. But again, personally, I wasn't able to just enjoy that time of and
Mhm.
that feeling of being back home, with a bigger fear behind me of like, am
Mm,
I gonna be able to go back and like see my parents? So like,
yeah.
yeah, so I had a good time. It was great seeing everybody, but yeah, again, with that in your mind, it's kind of hard to enjoy it. So it was good, but was we eventually, yeah, we were obviously able to get back, and going through like the immigration, like customs or whatever, and boarding back into the US was like the scariest thing. But like, as soon as they like approved it, because they take you into like a separate line, but then once
Oh.
they stamped it, they like stamp your passport, like that it's approved and you're good to go. Once that was done, I was like, we're in the clear. Like, so
Whew.
yeah, we're in the clear. So that's how that was. And so, like I said, when I go back again, I'm gonna go back with knowing that now, and now I know more, right, about advanced parole, and I've done it before, and immigration has seen that, and I'll be able to enjoy more of my roots and my country and what's around me, than just having the constant fear in my head, which is now just going to be like a little fear, because it's still going to be there, but
Yeah.
it's not going to stop me from like enjoying my time there and everything.
Well, I was thinking about that because, I know I mean, I'm not a DACA recipient, but I know like the process and everything. So I was thinking, I was like, wait, weren't they scared that they were not going to be able to come back?
Yeah.
Which was what I was going to ask, but you had answered that. So I just want to say that you guys are brave. Like, that is really, really
Yeah, and
brave
this was
of you
like when
guys.
it just rolled out, so which is why I was also super scared. Like, when they just said like, "Hey,
Wow.
you're able to travel with Advance Parole," so we were like one of the first to like sign up like immediately. So not knowing anything, not being that, now there's a bunch of like resources, like even guides on like how to apply for Advance Parole and do this and that. Back then, it's just like it's new. There's nothing except for what your lawyers are telling you. Like, so
Yeah.
we're like, oh, great. I don't even know. I don't know how it's gonna go on the way back. So, yeah, now there's a lot more, which is also another factor into why I would feel like more comfortable,
Yeah.
going now too.
Well, I'm glad you guys were able to have that experience, go back home, be connected with your roots, just because it's very important for us as immigrants. But I know that like not everyone has the chance to be able to or the opportunity to go back. And
Yeah.
even those who, who can, it sometimes takes years for
Hmm.
them to be able to go back home to visit. So, for example, like I had just had the previous episode that was just published, like she was able to go back home after 10 years. So
Okay.
it's like, a big gap that a
Hmm.
lot of people who are non-immigrants don't understand, that it's like it takes a lot for immigrants to be able, if they have the opportunity or can, to go back and visit. And yeah, it's just not easy for everybody.
Yeah, and it's just a lot of things that go into it as well, you know. My parents worked like their butts off, and then I was, privileged in that manner that they, um, while they worked a lot to help us too with like lawyer fees, um, at that time we were also old enough to be working, so we would also help with lawyer fees. So it was just a collaborative effort. Um, so not everyone has that unification with families. Not everyone has a great relationship. Not everyone's here with family. Maybe they're
Yep.
here by themselves. So I always acknowledge that, and I'm always thankful for that, because everyone's going through their own path, and it's not always straight, and it's
Hmm.
just you'll get there eventually, but it's not on the same timeline, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna happen, but at your own pace. So yeah, I was thankful that they also it's also taking that leap. I think the biggest
Mhm.
thing is whether you're here with family or you're here by yourself, um, you have to have a goal, and sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith and say, if this is what the lawyer is saying, um, then I think I'm just gonna go for it, right? Like, then I think I'm just gonna go
Yeah.
for it. Um, and even just seeking out like a lawyer, you know what I mean, like to help you out, and then just being like, okay, I'm gonna go to a lawyer, and then I'm gonna work a job, maybe work two jobs, and pay for that, because this is gonna help me in the long run. So just having that goal is just gonna have it's gonna help you just set your plans up to reach that goal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, so what does the American dream mean to you?
Yes. So coming here, it to me the American dream is just kind of like the cliche. You get here, you buy a home, and you work and you live your days out, right? Like, but we did eventually, once we bought a home, we were able to buy a home, and that came with its own hoops and barriers because of our status, but we did get that done, and that was one of the greatest like feelings in our lives. And
Yeah.
so for me, the American dream just kind of is always evolving. So to give
Mhm.
you one straight answer on it is hard for me, because it's depends where I am in life. And that's what the American kind of dream means to me, is kind of just where I am in life at that moment. And to me currently, it's really finding finding the time. To me, I've kind of learned, just being here, that time is the most important thing that we have, and being able to have a job that gets me financial freedom to give me time to enjoy more of life is now has kind of become the ultimate like American dream for me, because
Yeah.
in that sense, I want to be, yeah, working, but I don't want to be living to work, you know what I mean? And
Yep.
so I want to make sure that I'm using that money to invest yeah, in my future, but also in the moment, and just enjoying the people around me, just just enjoying life to its fullest, right? I think
Yep.
that's the ultimate dream for me.
I love that. And you are 100% correct. I agree with the American dream is evolving. Like I wrote an article about it and it was like, it was the house with the white picket fence, two
Right.
kids, the dog, the car, but it's like people are that's not what they want anymore. They want that
Mm-hmm.
freedom. They want
Yeah.
to work for themselves. They want to have more experiences to have that freedom, that
Mm-hmm.
liberty. And you're right, even my American dream has probably like day by day. It's like, no, maybe I want to do this or maybe I want to do
Right.
that, but
Yeah.
it is always evolving. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to get into your podcast. So tell us about the name, what it is, how you got started. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so the podcast kind of stemmed, I think there was this big wave of podcasting once the pandemic hit and people were indoors, and I was just kind of part of that wave. And for me, it's like, well, I need something to do. I always need something to do. Like I always have to be doing something. And I was just tired of being indoors, and I'm like, I need something to do. and
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm just start a podcast. I think I've always wanted to, one of the big goals is always coming from where I come, is helping the community. And ultimately, I want to get to a point where I have like maybe a physical location and actually get people in and like through the doors and help out kids and families and all that. I think that's like the big picture goal. But right now, the podcast started with that goal in mind, and this is just, well, if I don't start today, I'm gonna say I'm gonna try and start tomorrow, and then I'll never start. So I started that day, which was in, I think it was like September of 2021 is when I put out my first episode, and I've been podcasting since then, with breaks in between, just because of life and
Hmm.
just making sure that you don't burn out. It's very important. um so the podcast name is Latin American Educational Opportunities. And it's a bit of a mouthful, so I kind of say like the Leo podcast as well for short. But I really wanted to get the point across that it was an educational podcast, um, because I wanted to be doing something that's going to help the community, and something that I'm going to enjoy doing in the same time. And something that I enjoy doing is learning new things. I
Hmm.
always like to learn about life, about things, machines, technology, what's going on in the world, finance, everything. And I think I start and well, I know I started that podcast because of that reason, is wow, this is a great way to do the research on a topic or multiple topics. And then as I learn about it, as I learn about it, I can also share it with the community. And then we can just
Mm.
talk about it as well, when people reach out to me and say, oh, that's cool, that's interesting, like I didn't know that before. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, neither, I thought it was awesome. And then so like, I think the community aspect of it too is just amazing, and a big reason why I also do it. So yeah, I kind of just stuck with it. And a lot of episodes, they're short because like I said, they're educational, so it's very like heavy information, so I don't want to like overload people as
Mhm.
well with like a lot of information, because I know just from listening to a lot of podcasts myself, is that it's hard to retain information just from like an hour long episode of constant things being
Yes.
thrown at you. So
Mhm.
and I also do tech episodes because I love tech, so technology is just one of the things I've always been interested in as a little kid. I would like break down my PlayStation and put it back together, and same thing with the controllers, and it's just always been a fascination. So I always like to know like what's new and what's happening in the tech world. And that's another thing that I do for the episodes, and then that's awesome too to share with the community, because I think getting into tech is awesome for like the Latin American community, um, because it's, and just Latinos in general, and anyone that wants to and get into it. But it also pays well, and you're also get to do a lot for yourself. Like you can write your own softwares, your own machines, and start your own businesses with that. You can console, and it's just a great opportunity. So, and also another part of it is finance, because we lack a lot of educational, like financial literacy. We lack a lot of financial
Yes.
literacy in the United States. And from that aspect, I was able to meet a lot of great like content creators online that do educate people in like in our communities, in finance. And then I've had the opportunity to bring them on the podcast and then share their stories, and then what they do to help the community, and invest and build like a better future. Because ultimately, the US does run the way it runs is on the economy that it has. And a lot of people know that, and the more you understand that, the more you understand how this country works and how
Mhm.
businesses are ran, and then how what your role is in this economy, and how you can also move up in it. You have to understand it from the top down, and where you stand in order to move yourself up, right, and not
Mhm.
backwards. um so that's another key aspect of it. So yeah, it's just it's like a mixed things. Ultimately, it's just ultimately educational topics, with some guests here and there that I also bring on if they like, if they're starting like a business, or they already have a business from the community and they want to share it and how they got there. I like to do that as well, bring guests on, because it could inspire someone else to start a business.
That's so good. Yeah. I mean, sharing stories is powerful. So,
Hmm.
why I started this podcast, because I just feel like, we don't talk about the immigrant experience, like what actually happens once
Right.
immigrants arrive to this country. But that's awesome. I'm so glad that you went through and started the podcast and you stuck with it, because a lot of people, say they want to start things and
Yeah.
they don't actually execute. Or if they do, they, it's like, oh man, this is hard or whatever, or life happens and then they stop. So good for you for sticking through and educating our community.
Yeah.
And all those things that you mentioned are very important for us to know in the Latin community, because, finances is not really talked about. I mean, with our family, tech, like not really, and things like that. So it's like you're educating
Yeah.
on stuff that we usually don't talk about. So that's awesome, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank
Any
you.
any last words or any like words of encouragement or anything that you would like to leave the audience? I really appreciate you sharing your story today.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing me on here, and giving me the time to share my story as well. Hopefully it resonates with some people, and maybe it even inspires
Oh, it will.
others. And I think the words of, if anything that I've learned, like I said, in life, is just to don't let fear hold you back. And just kind of go for it. That's the biggest thing that I've learned throughout my process here as an immigrant, since a kid. Because, and I've learned that from my parents, because they've always just gone for it. Like, they have
Mm,
even more to fear, because they were undocumented too. Um, and we had DACA, but they didn't have anything, but they still went through with it. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And to be smart about it. A lot of people say that, like, just, don't let fear hold you back. And then that doesn't mean like YOLO, like I'm gonna go do this, like what, like, have a plan in place, like like take your time. I'm a very analytical, my part of my corporate job is analytical, and I'm just, my mind is in that, it's just that way. So I analyze situations, and I plan for outcomes, for different outcomes, and I just, that's how I approach things. And sometimes you can't plan for everything. So
yeah.
just while you have a plan, well, it's great to have a plan than no plan. Sometimes you just also have to, like, go for it, right? and
Yeah.
and then and then you'll find out how that the result, or else you'll never know.
Yeah, and then you just stayed with that what if, like what if
Yeah,
this, what if
and I
that.
think that's
Mm,
the worst thing is staying with the what if, than like than your
yes.
failures, because you can learn from failures, but you can't learn from what ifs. Like,
And you can brag as like, well, I already did that.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
and
already
like,
did that.
right. And then part of the best way to learn is just to fail. Like, yeah,
Yep.
like you did something and maybe it didn't go the way you wanted it to, but
But you did it.
you did it, and like if you want to do something similar, you now know to avoid doing that thing. Like like
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
How can people connect with you?
Um like any social media, literally, like at Latinoamericaneo, on every like TikTok, Instagram, whatever. But ultimately you can reach all that and my podcast at latinoamericaneo.org. And if you want to reach out to me, you can email me. You can just hit the contact button on there, um, or Instagram. I think the best way to reach out to me is Instagram because I'm more
In the gram.
like active on my DMs in there. I do check my email, but it just takes me a little bit more time to get in and check them all, as you might know. But I am more. I
Well,
do reply
I
quicker on
actually,
Instagram.
not to put you on blast, but I did
Yeah.
reach out to you
Uh,
during DM, but I actually got
oh,
connected with
okay.
you through Threads. I think that's
Oh,
where
okay.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
how
You
like
did. Yeah,
I
you
really
did.
got
You
it on
reached
your
out
radar
to me.
because I sent you a
Yep.
DM. But
Oh,
no,
okay, yeah. My bad, my bad.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But here we are.
Yeah.
And no, thank you, Kevin. I will include all your links in the show notes and in the show description. Thank you again for sharing your story, sharing your journey. Thank you again for that podcast and educating our community because it's so important. So just thank you so much for everything. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on here, and thank you for reaching out to me, even if I did miss you. Some of your messages from before. I appreciate you reaching out again. It's it's like I said, sometimes the messages get by me.
They do. They
But
do.
so I appreciate you sticking with that and giving me this opportunity. I really enjoy. I've heard some of the other episodes and enjoy the stories, and I knew I wanted to be on here just to be part of what you're building here and what you already built. So
Oh,
yeah, thank you,
thank you.
appreciate it, and have a good rest of your weekend as well.